Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Rachel and I do planty content, planty hauls, planty repots, planty tours, planty information, everything planty. And today I have a video for those who are interested in getting a orchid, or they have just bought an orchid, or they were gifted an orchid and they have no idea how to keep it alive or have it bloom again. So that is what we're going to be doing today. I am going to be taking this orchid that I bought from the grocery store literally last night and teaching you how to take it from this to this and have it survive and look good in your house and keep on producing beautiful blooms so that you're not just throwing away an orchid whenever it loses its blooms. They are regular bloomers and we are going to make it to where it's a staple in your household. So thank you so much for joining me and I hope you're able to learn something or enjoy the video, and let's get started. So you've bought your orchid or you've been gifted an orchid, you have an orchid. And you are either tired of killing them or you just want to do right for the first one that you've got and you're wondering where to start, and that is a reasonable place to be. In all honesty, it took me probably 3 orchids. I've killed 3 orchids trying to figure out how to work with them, and I'm still not an expert, but I do know how to keep one alive and I do know how to make one bloom again. So I feel like I have a little bit of area to make this video, and if you are an expert and see something wrong with this video, please point it out to me. I am always open to learning. But so I bought this at the grocery store last night and thought it would be a perfect time to do my orchid version of this series. And I forgot to mention, but I am doing a series. It'll be a playlist that I'll link over in the top of the video, where I'm doing like basically 101 step 1 for like certain types of plants. I've already done a cactus. I think, yeah. Cactus, I can't remember which one I've already done, but I've already done one, so that'll be linked up there. But this is the orchid version. So I'll kind of start off on like where to do with watering, and then what to do with soil, and then how to do the roots and all that different stuff. So let's get into it. First thing is watering. So as you can see, it comes with this little, a lot of orchids come with this little thing that says water, 1 ice cube a week. I have found that is not the case. I think it all kind of starts with the fact that these plants are tropical, so they're not going to be used to cold water anyways, so I don't think that the cold is good for them. But besides that, the amount of water that the orchid needs depends on what kind of light it's getting, how the leaves are doing, how many leaves it has, what the roots look like, and whether it's flowering or not. So you have all these different factors going into how much water that an orchid needs, and so the blanket statement of like 1 ice cube a week is just not gonna work. We're gonna move past that, okay? And so I'll show you what to look for with an orchid to tell you whether or not to water it. I brought up my orchid from downstairs to show you what the roots look like, healthy roots, what they look like whenever you need to water them versus when you don't need to water them. So you can see it's in a clear pot for a reason. Oh, but let me just show you this. Ooh. Maybe you can see that. She's so pretty. She just started blooming like a couple days ago. So anyways, besides that, you can see the roots through the clear pot, which is on purpose. You can see that the tips are green, which means that they are healthy and growing. And you can kind of see how like these roots look more green than they do silver. And so a silver root is gonna look like this one. That is a silver root. When the roots are silver, and I'm looking for all the roots to be silver, that means it needs to be watered. If they're green, this is even still too green for me to water them. And for watering, I have been bottom watering, especially because I have my orchids in sphagnum moss. So the sphagnum moss just easily, I put some water in here. The sphagnum moss soaks it all up. After it soaks it all up, I empty the extra water. And then as the sphagnum moss dries out, the roots pull the moisture they need from the sphagnum moss, and then I look for them to be silver again, and then I repeat the process. So that was watering. I'm also going to talk about fertilizer just because it is basically connected to watering. I just picked up a, orchid fertilizer. I followed the directions, and the general rule, I believe, is that you fertilize when it's not flowering and do not fertilize if it's flowering. So I am not going to fertilize this orchid until it drops all its leaves and there's no flowers. Not all its leaves. After it drops all its flowers and there's no flowers there. So like right before this orchid put out this flower, I had been fertilizing it since I cut it right here to make this new shoot come out. I have been fertilizing it until it started flowering. Now the water that I put in the cash pot is going to be just plain filtered water. Next thing I want to talk about is light. So I have all of mine on windowsills and they seem to be loving it. I've seen people have them obviously like in doctor's offices and stuff, they'll put them on the counters where there's no windows. And I just don't want you to be fooled that those people just buy new orchids when they die because they are not actively growing. There's not enough light in those situations. So I always have mine either under a grow light or on the windowsill. Moving on to kind of like how it's set up in the pot is the pot type. I have mine always in a clear pot, just like this one came in. This is really good. Just so you can see the roots because you need to be able to see whether or not they're silver or green. A lot of times at the stores, you'll also see orchid pots that have a ton of holes in them. And that's also a great option because, orchids don't like to have sitting water. And they like to be able to, they're aerated and stuff like that. They're an epiphytic plant. So they get water from the air and they don't like a very dense substrate. So you're not gonna put them in potting soil. It's gonna be, I guess I can get more into substrates as well. It's going to be sphagnum moss, it's going to be orchid bark, or very, very chunky orchid mix is what you're going to be putting them in. So those pots are also an option. I don't do that just because my sphagnum moss is, it's not super dense. I keep it very aerated, and I find that, clear pots like this one are totally fine. Last thing I want to talk about before I repot this orchid is what to do when the orchid is done flowering. So when an orchid is done flowering, you're not going to just throw it away. Please don't do that. It will bloom again. And orchids are very expensive. So if you can get this thing to bloom multiple times, I think that you would want to do that. So when an orchid is done blooming, you will see these different spots on the orchid. Those are called eyes. And whenever, like for example, whenever all of these blooms fall off, you can see that this eye has already, like it's empty. It's already been, something's already grown from it. Same thing, actually not same thing. This one is closed. This is a closed eye. So what I'm gonna do is cut in between these two eyes. And you can see how I did that with this orchid. So it was flowering from this stem. It used to have a stem right here. And this was the open eye. No, closed, sorry. Not confusing you. This was the closed eye. And there was an open one up here where it was flowering from. And I cut right above the closed eye and it grew a new stalk out of it. So that is what you're going to do with, and then keep, watering it, keep it in light. Make sure you use the fertilizer when it's not flowering, and then you will have another stalk grow out and have more flowers. It is time to pot. Okay, I'm gonna angle you down here so you can kind of see what's going on. All right, first thing we're gonna do is sterilize our shears. I literally just use the sterilization, like the alcohol from my nail kit, LOL. So I'm going to just wipe those down so we don't spread anything from my other plants. All right, we're gonna break this baby open. So I'm gonna take her out of the cash pot and then just wiggle her out of this. And we're probably gonna be using this pot again just because I can already tell the roots are not very extensive or healthy. So I am going to remove all of this sponge and then kind of see what the roots are looking like. Which is very easy to do, obviously. Yep, that was easy. That's awesome. Wouldn't you want to grow in that? LOL. All right, I'm going to disconnect her from these supports. We'll be using those later. And you can kind of see how like we have some really dry roots right there. You see how it's all crinkly? I'm gonna cut that off. But honestly, the other ones don't look too bad. So I'm gonna cut this one off, definitely, that's all crispy. And we even have another flower stalk coming out right there. So this one's doing pretty good. All right, now that we have all of that out of the way, I'm going to set up her new home. So we're gonna take this pot and I'm going to put some sphagnum moss in the base of it. Just like that, so that she's not touching the absolute bottom. And then I'm going to place her back in and try to push the sphagnum moss as best as I can in the empty areas. All right, that is looking pretty good. This ladybug pot is honestly pretty cute, but I'm gonna put her in a different one. I'm gonna use this one that I had that has a hole in it, but I'm gonna put a plug in the hole so I can use it as a cash pot. I saved the plugs that I removed from a majority of the pots so that I can use them again if I ever wanna make something a cash pot. So I'm just gonna pop her in like that. And then I'm gonna put the supports back in. And use our little clips. Nice. All right, I think we have a finished product and some new substrate, so her roots are gonna get a lot healthier, and hopefully we can see that third flower spike pop out soon. Well, I hope you were able to learn something. Thank you so much for joining me for that orchid how-to. This is the finished product that we wound up with. I think that she's looking so pretty. I love the like slight pink on the flowers, and I just knew when I saw this in the grocery store that I had to save her. I had to do it, and I had to show you how to save yours and how to keep them in your home for a very long time, constantly, or not constantly, but consistently producing blooms and just not being thrown in the trash after they're done blooming. We need to stop that. All right, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.